Hey riders, over here. Welcome to another video, and actually, hang on a second. Oh, it's quite a hill climb. Anyway, welcome to another video in our adventure motorcycle training series. I'm Eric Lange with Ride Adventures. I've been riding and guiding motorcycle trips around the world and creating our touring and renting operation since 2008. You know, climbing hills like this on a motorcycle is one of my favorite things to do. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to master your hill climbing skills and how to get out of trouble if you get into it. So let's get into character. So like I was saying at the top, a hill climb like this is an absolute highlight of riding motorcycles. That feeling of pulling the power out of the engine and driving it down into the rear wheel, looking for that traction as you're navigating over rocks and ruts and doing whatever you have to do to crawl your way to the top. What a feeling. There's a lot that can go wrong, of course, too. If you slip out, you crash out or whatever, you're looking at bike damage or possibly a personal injury. Of course, you want to avoid. So let's talk through this entire process, keeping in mind that your two best friends are going to be traction and momentum. We're going to talk through how to get those through the approach, through the hill climb, all the way up and through the finish. So let's talk through the approach here. You know, hopefully you're in a position where you can actually stop and evaluate the climb that you're about to attempt instead of rushing into it. Of course, as you get better and time goes on, it's no problem just to run into these things and figure it out as you're going along. But if you do have a chance to sit back and evaluate the situation, I'm going to look at this hill climb, one that I've done before, and say it's easy for me to know that that left side path is the widest, the easiest to stay on. I also know that the undulations aren't too significant and the traction isn't too bad. There's a couple of loose spots there, but ultimately that's really a pretty high traction line on the left side there. Let's say that wasn't available to me. I would maybe then choose the kind of the peninsula over toward the right side there. The risk there being, you know, it's kind of rough getting into it at the bottom with some big rocks, and then if you slip off of that peninsula on either side, now you're down into a rut there. But every hill climb is a little bit different. I happen to know that this one's going to be easiest if I just go up on the left-hand side there, and no matter what, that I'm ready for a change if things don't turn out exactly the way that I planned. Another thing to think about in this approach moment is what gear you're going to be in. You know, that's just a matter of getting to know the bike that you're riding and how the power is throughout the RPMs and, you know, how steep the climb is going to be and things like that. That's just something you're going to get to know and hopefully be in a position where you don't have to downshift or even upshift halfway up the hill, because you can lose a lot of momentum that way, and you don't want to lose momentum, as we were saying before, which drives me to my last point here, which is that this approach is about gaining your momentum. So whether that means you need to slide back on the seat to grip the ground a little bit better with that rear tire, or do whatever it is to get your momentum within reason, get your momentum up as much as you can to help it carry you to the top of this hill. So with the approach behind us, now the real fun begins as you're at the base of the hill and about to start the actual fun climbing part of it. So, you know, you might want to think at this point about whether you should be in the sitting or the standing position on the bike, you know, or an attack position, as some people call it. I can see, though, on this left path that I'm going to take going up, that it's not real slippery. There's not a lot of loose gravel. There's actually decent traction such that I could do this with most street tires with no problem. I can see that there are a couple of undulations that might make me want to stand a little bit and use my legs as suspension to try and help drive that traction down into the ground. But again, this is a situation where I could stay seated if it's the end of a long day and I'm just tired and just need to get to the top. Saving that last little bit of energy in the seat can be an easier way to get to the top. So I need to be ready, though, because I might be wrong. I might hit a rock that I'm not seeing, and all of a sudden, bam, I'm sliding down into one of those, into that rut on the right or in the middle. And things are changing. You need to be available to make change, and that's where the practice and time and your skills as a rider really come into place. And all of this, whether you're in the sitting or the standing position, and the things that you're going to want to consider, is something we've actually talked about. We'll put a link in the description, another video where we talk about when and why you should sit and stand on a motorcycle. And so as you're adapting to the changes needed, and you're either sitting or standing or changing maybe on the way up, hopefully not having to shift gears at all, keep that never quit attitude with you, because starting to back off a little bit on the throttle or starting to give up is part of losing that traction and losing that momentum that you need ultimately to carry you through to the finish. So with that never quit mentality in mind, carry that through all the way through the finish. So As you're going up, you might find near the top that it's feeling like you can back off and you've almost made it, but then all of a sudden you catch another little gravel patch or something that makes you slip, and now all of a sudden you've slowed down again. And you know what, if your rear wheel does start slipping more than you had planned it to be, just winding it out and spinning it super fast is not necessarily a great way of grabbing traction either. You know, there's a happy medium there as to turning the wheel too fast versus slowing it down a little bit and grabbing some of the ground that's beneath you. But whatever it takes, the thought being finish, finish, finish all the way through. Don't quit early, go all the way to the top. So as promised, in a moment, we're going to show you how to get unstuck if things go wrong. But in the meantime, what are the contributing factors to maybe your unsuccessful hill climb in the first place? Let's start with maybe your tire selection. You have the wrong type of tire for the traction requirements, or you have too high of a pressure, you were riding street and you just don't have the traction to get up it. You were spinning, you lost your traction, you lost your momentum, now you're stuck on the hill. Could be that you have completely the wrong bike for this job in the first place. You don't have the suspension travel and the ground clearance needed to make it over some of the rocks and the undulations that might be embedded in front of you. Maybe if you have luggage on your bike, you should have taken that luggage off before attempting a climb like this. Don't forget that that weight up high on a bike tends to make it want to lean backwards as you're going up a hill like this. So in addition to your needs of trying to keep the front end down, keep your traction going as well, maybe you should just dismount all your luggage, carry it up to the top of the hill. And of course, just the physics of all this between where you are positioning yourself on the bike, whether you're on the pegs or if you had enough weight on the handlebars, whether your bike is just too tall for the steepness of the hill and the climb involved in the first place. There's a handful of reasons why it just might not be even possible to climb the hill that you want to climb. So keep in mind, maybe just because you saw other people climb the same hill, it doesn't mean that your bike and your setup or your skill level are meant to do those things right now. Maybe you can make some adjustments to your situation with your luggage or your tire pressure or whatever it is, and maybe you can still do it, but not every hill is meant to be climbed by every rider and every situation. Your skill level might not be there. The beauty is there's probably another way around. Go have yourself another little side adventure to make it to the other side of that hill. So for any of the aforementioned ideas or possibly some others, things might not have gone well. You didn't make it to the top of the hill. Now you're stuck, you're on your side, whatever. Hopefully you're not hurt. It might be possible to just upright the bike and continue up the hill from where you were. Although a lot of the times the traction at that point, you know, you got loose gravel like you do down in these ruts, and you're not gonna have enough traction and you've completely lost all of your momentum, such that it might be necessary to just turn around, get back down the hill and give it another shot or go another way around. But if you end up with your bike on its side like this, hopefully it's not completely inverted facing down the hill. What I mean is with the seat actually toward the lower part of the hill. If it is in that situation, it's really hard to pick up from that downward or inverted position, and you're going to want to find some way to pivot the bike around, pivot it one way or the other until basically the seat is pointed up the hill. And I'm going to suggest that you get this position where it is now pointed directly laterally across the fall line of the hill. So at a 90-degree angle to the path that you were basically following on. Get it 90 degrees like that directly across the hill. If the bike's on its left side, that means you have access to the rear brake, right? You can get the bike up, get your foot on that rear brake to make sure that you have that stopping power there, and then just start wiggling the front handlebars back and forth with the front brake on, and let it sort of slide itself down through that loose terrain, and it'll wiggle its way down to a more downward facing position where you can just get on the bike and ride away. If the bike was on its right side, now you don't have as easy access immediately to that rear brake pedal, but you do have the ability to make sure it's at least in first gear. So you can use the clutch kind of like you would a rear brake in that situation. Again, maintaining that stability with a fixed rear end, not letting the bike roll backward or slide down the hill, and start wiggling those handlebars back and forth so that eventually the bike is pointed at least somewhat down the hill until you feel comfortable giving it a push, giving it a throttle, and rolling down the hill to get to the bottom. Also, if you happen to be in a rut or something's keeping you from pivoting the bike around, it might be necessary just to back down straight back the way you came up. So use your front brake as much as it will work. It will slide a lot because the front wheel doesn't have any weight on it, but use your back brake as well, and or the clutch with the bike in first gear to brake yourself as you go down backwards. So remember, you've got some options. If you want to try and continue to get started, just picking up from this position and continuing up the hill, go ahead and do so. Just keep in mind that traction might not even make this a possibility. If you do have the traction, remember, it's going to take an extra long clutch burn. It's not like sitting on flat ground on pavement at a stoplight somewhere where you can basically let the clutch out in a second or a second and a half like that. It might take a good long 4, 5, 6 second long clutch burn to get that momentum going up the hill, again, if you have the traction. But if you don't have the traction, if it's just completely impractical, you've got these other methods for turning the bike around, get it into position so that you can hop on it, ride to the bottom, try again, or try another route. So just as we're about to wrap up, finally a surprise rain shower here in Central Oregon. You know me though, I don't want to get my hair wet, so under the tent here to wrap things up. Hope this list of tips and suggestions helps you get to the top every time you want to climb a hill. One last tip and thought is, remember, when you're pivoting around, you're turning the bike around and you've got the bike slanted across the slope like that, keep your downhill foot on the peg, because you don't want to give yourself the thought that if I put my foot, that downhill foot out, I'm going to be able to stop myself, right? If the bike does start falling downhill, you will not be able to reach the ground and stop yourself. So to that point too, keep extra weight on the uphill foot. Put an extra 50 pounds on that uphill leg and keep the downhill foot on the peg. It'll help make sure you don't high side it going down the hill. Anyway, hope this helps you folks. If there's something we forgot to mention, please leave it in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications button so you know when we're releasing these videos. We want you to keep learning more. We want you to share this information with others. And thanks for watching. Ride on. We'll see you out there.